Now, more stories, insights, and analysis of Illinois policy and politics. This is Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Opportunity Project. Once again, your host, AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Pat Hughes in this edition of Rising. Pat, an interesting story in the Sun-Times this week about Jim Durkin, and of course the House Republican Minority Leader Jim Durkin, been there for 20 years, being challenged by Mickey Straub, the mayor of Burr Ridge. In my private life, I'm supporting Mickey Straub, so in the interest of full disclosure. But this is a Sun-Times story. This is Dan Mahopoulos writing this story. Somebody's lying about this effort to install a strip joint in Broadview. And the former mayor of Broadview, a guy named Vicenic, was in a deposition suggested that Jim Durkin had intervened between the village of Broadview and concerns for a enterprise called Chicago Joe's Tea Room, which is going to be a strip joint, to set up a meeting between a former Madigan staffer named Dave Donahue, representing Chicago Joe's, and the mayor of Broadview at the time, this guy Vicenic, to see if they can't, work out their differences of opinion. Jim Durkin said he did no such thing. The ex-mayor, Henry Vicenic, said Jim Durkin called and asked if he would meet with Donahue. Is this a big deal, or is this, hey, Jim Durkin, he's a part-time legislator, and in his other job, he is a practicing attorney, and so to the extent that he intervenes in disputes between a prospective business and a municipality, what's the big deal?
Well, it's a big deal because he's running in a Republican primary to hold on to his seat against a candidate who I also in my private life support, Mickey Straub, who is a conservative, religious, reform person who fits the model of the district. And nothing says conservative reformer less than strip club. And so the fact that this is what this guy is spending his either legal time, I've been a lawyer for years, I've never intervened on behalf of getting a strip club place somewhere, or is using his sort of political connections or legislative prowess to help a strip club get established, and then is now denying it because he knows politically how bad that looks. Yeah, I think it's a big deal. I think that's why the Sun-Times is following it.
Yeah, and we've talked before about Jim Durkin kind of being a Madigan mini-me in terms of leveraging his office for municipal work that generates fees for his law firm, Arnstein and Lair, and then obviously pays his salary in addition to that. But I wonder how people in Western Springs and Burr Ridge and Willowbrook and Lamont, and the rest of the district, would view trying to kind of put your finger on the scale for a strip joint that the village of Broadview didn't want, and thus that gave rise to the litigation between this strip joint concern and the village, with the mayor saying Jim Durkin called him.
So this is what I think the people in that district would want, because it's a neighboring district to me, and particularly in Republican primary voters. What they want, Dan, is for someone like Jim Durkin in his position, who hopefully will then be Mickey Straub when the election is over, to be on the side of the Broadview residents and against the strip club. They'd want him to be standing up in front of the, with cameras and on the piece of property saying there will be no strip club here because this isn't what's good for the families of Broadview. This isn't what's good for, this community. That's what they would expect and want from the Republican minority legislative leader, not the opposite.
Yeah, it just seems to be this recurring story about Republicans and Democrats getting along for the interests, for their financial interests, no matter how at odds with community mores, desires that may be, at the expense of those they represent. I mean, Broadview's not in Durkin's district, but it's not far from it. And so the question is, would you be happy if you're, a denizen of Western Springs, if Jim Durkin was inveighing on behalf of a strip joint coming to Western Springs? coming to Burr Ridge, coming to Lamont? I suspect not, and Broadview felt the same way. And Durkin, even though his firm had previously represented the village of Broadview, was trying to work it out between these interested parties. It's just interesting when you see Republicans time and time again coming to the defense of interests that are otherwise ostensibly disconnected from their stated positions as a public official.
Yeah, and the other thing, Dan, that is so endemic in our politics and in this story is, Jim Durkin's in a safe Republican district. He's the House Minority Leader. He ostensibly has support from the billionaire governor, however much money Ronner has. So he never in a million years envisioned in the 20 years he's been in office that he would have any type of real challenge, right? He didn't. He expected his seat was always his seat for as long as he wanted it. And now, so he does these things thinking, well, there's no political consequence to almost anything I do because of the circumstances, and now there are political consequences to all of the failures and backroom dealings and self-dealing that he's done over the years, and it's coming back to haunt him.
Why would you make a call on behalf of Dave Donahue, a Madigan staffer who then worked for, subsequently imprisoned Cicero Mayor Betty Lauren Maltese, testified in this case that he's a $1,500 a week consultant to Polecats, which is a strip club in Bridgeview, and then representing, as Durkin obviously knew, this strip joint Prospect, Chicago Joe's for Broadview. Why would you ever be involved with somebody like that if you weren't involved with somebody like that?